But I'm going to leave the stream going. If it causes an echo or a feedback, I'm sorry.
Prepared for some form of diplomacy, but it has to be conditioned upon the end result of denuclearization. So that's what we're doing right now, consulting with our allies.
Just very quick
You only got another hour now, okay?
Diplomacy, can you define what you mean? And former President Obama warned the incoming President Trump that North Korea was the top foreign policy issue that he was watching. Is that how you assess the crisis in North Korea?
Yes. Okay, hang on a second here. Kristen, Nancy, CBS.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I want to go back to voting rights. And as Yamiche mentioned, Republican legislatures across the country are working to pass bills that would restrict voting, particularly Democrats fear impacting minority voters and young voters, the very people who helped to get you elected in November. Are you worried that if you don't manage to pass voting rights legislation, that your party is going to lose seats and possibly lose control of the House and the Senate in 2022?
What I'm worried about is how un-American this whole initiative is. It's sick. It's sick. Deciding in some states that you cannot bring water to people standing in line, waiting to vote. Deciding that you're going to end voting at 5 o'clock when working people are just getting off work. Deciding that there will be no absentee ballots under the most rigid circumstances. It's all designed, and I'm going to spend my time doing three things. One, trying to figure out how to pass the legislation passed by the House, number one. Number two, educating the American public. The Republican voters I know find this despicable. Republican voters, folks outside this White House. I'm not talking about the elected officials. I'm talking about voters. And so I'm convinced that we'll be able to stop this because it is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle. I mean, this is gigantic, what they're trying to do. And it cannot be sustained. I'll do everything in my power, along with my friends in the House and the Senate, to keep that from becoming a law.
Is there anything else you can do about it besides passing legislation?
The answer is yes, but I'm not going to lay out a strategy in front of the whole world to do that.
And then on a related note, have you decided whether you are going to run for re-election in 2024? You haven't set up a re-election campaign yet, as your predecessor had by this time.
My predecessor needed to. My predecessor. Oh God, I miss him.
Have you?
No, an answer is yes. My plan is to run for re-election. That's my expectation.
And then on one other note, on bipartisanship, your old friend Mitch McConnell says you have only spoken to each other once since you took office, and that you have moved far left since taking office. Do you see it the same way he does? Have you rejected bipartisanship?
No, I haven't at all. The meeting, when's the last time a president invited the opposite party down at least a half a dozen times to talk about issues that run from how we work? We're working with a group of 20 members of the Senate right now and House on how we reestablish our ability to make computer chips and how we get ahead of the game, how we can work together. We're working together on a bunch of things. But look, I know Mitch well. Mitch knows me well. I would expect Mitch to say exactly what he said. But this is a matter of making sure that I would like elected Republican support. But what I know I have now is I have electoral support from Republican voters. Republican voters agree with what I'm doing. And so unless Mitch says the last thing I did, this last piece of legislation, is so far left, well, then you ought to take a look at his party. Over 50% of them must be over that edge as well, because they support what I did. Okay, where am I here? Let me see. Caitlin?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I have a question for you, but first, I'd like to follow up on a question from Yamiche, and that's on the filibuster.
That counts as a question, but go ahead.
Okay, I'll make it quick. It's a
No,
quick
no, you
question. Regarding the filibuster, at John Lewis's funeral, President Barack Obama said he believed the filibuster was a relic of the Jim Crow era. Do you agree?
Yes.
If not, why not abolish it if it's a relic of the Jim Crow era?
Successful electoral politics is the art of the possible. Let's figure out how we can get this done and move in the direction of significantly changing the abuse of even the filibuster rule first. It's been abused from the time it came into being by an extreme way in the last 20 years. Let's deal with the abuse first.
You're moving closer to eliminating the filibuster, is that correct?
I answered your question.
You also just made some news by saying that you are going to run for re-election.
I said that is my expectation.
So is that a yes, that you are running for re-election?
Look, I don't know where you guys come from, man. I'm a great respecter of fate. I've never been able to plan 3.5 years ahead.
If you do run,
That's a good
will
answer.
Vice President Harris be on your ticket?
I would fully expect that to be the case. She's doing a great job. She's a great partner. She's a great partner.
And do you believe you'll be running against former President Trump?
Oh, come on. I don't even think about it. I have no idea. I have no idea whether there'll be a Republican Party. Do you? I know you don't have to answer my question. Do you? I mean, look, this is the way I view things. I've become a great respecter of fate in my life. I set a goal that's in front of me to get things done for the people I care most about, which are hard-working, decent American people getting really having it stuck to them. I want to change the paradigm. I want to change the paradigm. We start to reward work, not just wealth. I want to change the paradigm. If you notice, didn't you find it kind of interesting that my Republican friends were worried about that the cost and the taxes that had to be had, if there is any tax to be had as they talk about it, and dealing with the act that we just passed, which puts money in people's pockets, ordinary people? Do you hear them complain when they passed close to $2 trillion Trump tax cut, 83% going to the top 1%? Do you hear them talk about that at all? I love the fact that they found this whole idea of concern about the federal budget. It's kind of amazing. When the federal budget is saving people's lives, they don't think it's such a good idea. When the federal budget is feathering the nest of the wealthiest Americans, 90 of the Fortune 500 companies making billions of dollars not paying a cent in taxes, reducing taxes to a point that people who are making, if you're a husband and wife, school teacher, and a cop, you're paying at a higher rate than the average person making $1 billion a year is. Something's wrong. Their newfound concern. I'm concerned, look, I meant what I said when I ran, and a lot of you still think I'm wrong, and I respect that. So I'm running for 3 reasons. To restore the soul, dignity, honor, honesty, transparency to the American political system. 2, to rebuild the backbone of this country, the middle class. Hard-working people, people struggling to get in the middle class. They build America, and unions built them.
Good words, Joe.
Third reason
Follow
I
up
said I
on
was
them.
running was to unite the country. And generically speaking, all of you said, no, you can't do that. Well, I've not been able to unite the Congress, but I've been uniting the country based on the polling data. We have to come together. We have to. So from my perspective, it's to me, it's about just, getting out there, putting one foot in front of the other, and just trying to make things better for people. Just hard-working people. People get up every morning and just want to figure out how to put food on the table for the kids, be able to have a little bit of breathing room. being able to make sure that they go to bed not staring at the ceiling like my dad did, wondering since he didn't have health insurance, what happens if mom gets sick or he got sick. These are basic things. Basic things. And I'm of the view that the vast majority of people, including registered Republicans by and large, share that same view, that same sense of what is what's appropriate. Justin, doesn't see Bloomberg.
Thanks, Mr. President. I wanted to ask about your relationship with China now that you've been in office for a couple months. There's obviously the meeting in Alaska that was a little theatrical, and there's continued human rights abuses. So today, I'm wondering, are you more likely than you were when you came into office to maintain tariffs on China? Are you considering banning imports of forced labor products? And would you consider cutting off U.S. investment or Chinese access to international payment systems?
Look, they're each specifically legitimate questions, but they only touch a smidgen of what the relationship with China really is about. I've known Xi Jinping for a long time. Allegedly, by the time I left office as vice president, I had spent more time with Xi Jinping than any world leader had. Because President Obama and the Chinese President Hu decided we should get to know one another, since it was inappropriate for the President of the United States to spend time with the Vice President of the country. But it was obvious he was going to become the new leader of China. So I spent hours upon hours with him alone with an interpreter, my interpreter and his, going into great detail. He's very, very straightforward. Doesn't have a democratic with a small d bone in his body, but he's a smart guy. He's one of the guys like Putin who thinks that autocracy is the way that the future democracy can't function in an ever-complex world. So when I was elected and he called to congratulate me, I think to the surprise of the China experts who were his people on the call as well as mine, listened, we had a 2-hour conversation for 2 hours. And we made several things clear to one another. I made it clear to him again, what I've told him in person on several occasions, that we're not looking for confrontation, although we know there will be steep competition. 2, that we'll have strong competition, but we'll insist that China play by the international rules. Fair competition, fair practices, fair trade. Thirdly, in order to compete effectively, I indicated that we're going to deal with China effectively. And we're going to need 3 things to do that. Telling our people. First, we're going to invest in American workers and American science. I said that all through the campaign, I say it again, and I'm setting up my administration to be able to do that, which is that, back in the 60s, we used to invest a little over 2% of our entire GDP in pure research and investment in science. Today, it's 0.7%. I'm going to change that. We're going to change that. The future lies in who can, in fact, own the future as it relates to technology, quantum computing, a whole range of things, including the medical fields. And so...
It would be a hoot to hear Joe Biden try to talk intelligently on quantum computing.
One of the reasons why I set up the PIAB, the President's Board of Scientists and what, again, is we're going to invest in medical research, cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, the things, industries of the future, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotech, and we're going to make real investments. China is out investing us by a long shot because their plan is to own that future. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to reestablish our alliances, and I've been very clear with them. It's not anti-Chinese. I mean, we've talked about it. I want to make sure that, for example, later today, after this, as a matter of fact, shortly after this, which is fine, we've been going close to an hour, I'm happy to go longer, but one of the things that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be speaking with 27 heads of state in Europe. And very shortly, I think within the next hour or so, I don't know the exact time. And earlier this month, and apparently it got the Chinese attention, that's not why I did it, I met with our allies and how we're going to hold China accountable in the region. Australia, India, Japan, and the United States, the so-called Quad. Because we have to have democracies working together. Before too long, I'm going to invite an alliance of democracies to come here to discuss the future. And so we're going to make it clear that in order to deal with these things, we are going to hold China accountable to follow the rules. Follow the rules. Whether it relates to the South China Sea or the North China Sea or the agreement made on Taiwan or a whole range of other things. And the third thing, and the thing that I admire about dealing with Xi is he understands, he makes no pretense about not understanding what I'm saying any more I do him. I pointed out to him, no leader can be sustained in his position, her position, unless they represent the values of the country. And I said, Mr. President, as I've told you before, Americans value the notion of freedom. America values human rights. We don't always live up to our expectations, but it's a value system. We are founded on that principle. And as long as you and your country continues to so blatantly violate human rights, we're going to continue in an unrelenting way to call to the attention of the world and make it clear what's happening. And he understood that. He made it clear that no American president, at least one did, but no American president ever backed down from speaking out of what's happening in the Uyghurs, what's happening in Hong Kong, what's happening in country. That's who we are. The moment a president walks away from that, as the last one did, is the moment we begin to lose our legitimacy around the world. It's who we are. So I see stiff competition with China. China has an overall goal, and I don't criticize
It's pronounced
the goal.
China.
They have an overall goal to become the leading country in the world, the wealthiest country in the world, and the most powerful country in the world. That's not going to happen on my watch. The United States is going to continue to grow and expand.
All right, just to follow up on the meeting of democracies, is that where you expect in a multilateral way to make these decisions about sanctions or
No, that's not where I make the decision. That's where I make sure we're all on the same page. All on the same page. Look, I predict to you, your children or grandchildren are going to be doing their doctoral thesis on issue of who succeeded, autocracy or democracy. Because that is what is at stake. Not just with China. Look around the world. We're in the midst of a fourth industrial revolution of enormous consequence. Will there be middle class?
This meeting is being recorded.
How will people adjust to these significant changes in science and technology, the environment? How will they do that? Now, our democracy is equipped because all the people get to speak, to compete. It is clear, absolutely clear, and most of the scholars I've dealt with at Penn agree with me around the country, that this is a battle between the utility of democracies in the 21st century and autocracies. You notice, we don't have Russia talking about communism anymore. It's about an autocracy. Demand decisions made by a leader of a country. That's what's at stake here. We got to prove democracy works.
President, sorry, I know you haven't had a chance to address the tragedies in Georgia and Colorado, you have said to stay tuned for actions that you might take on gun control. Wondering if you've made a decision either about sending the manufacturer liability bill that you promised on day one to Capitol Hill, or executive actions like going after ghost guns or giving money to cities and states to battle gun control.
All the above. It's a matter of timing. As you've all observed, successful presidents, better than me, have been successful in large part because they know how to time what they're doing. Order it. Decide the priorities. What needs to be done. The next major initiative is, and I'll be announcing it Friday in Pittsburgh in detail, is to rebuild the infrastructure, both physical and technological infrastructure of this country, so that we can compete and create significant numbers of really good paying jobs.
Please do.
Really good paying jobs. And some of you have been around long enough to know that used to be a great Republican goal initiative.
It's been a while.
I still think the majority of the American people don't like the fact that we are now ranked, 85th in the world in infrastructure. I mean, look, the future rests on whether or not we have the best airports that can accommodate air travel, ports that can get it out quickly, so businesses decide. Some of you, if you were ever local reporters, and you found your governor or mayor trying to attract business to your community, what's the first thing the business asks? What's the closest access to the interstate highway? How far am I from freight rail? Is the water available? Is enough water available for me to conduct my business? All the things that relate to infrastructure. We have somewhere, I asked the staff to write it down for me, and they did, not for this, but for a longer discussion. We have somewhere, in terms of infrastructure, we rank 13th globally in infrastructure. China is investing 3 times more in infrastructure than the United States is. Bridges, more than 1/3 of our bridges, 231,000 of them, need repairs. Some are physical safety risks or preservation work. 1 in 5 miles of our highways and major roads are in poor condition. That's 186,000 miles of highway. Aviation, 20% of all flights weren't on time, resulting in $1.5 million lost in production. 6 to 10 million homes in America still have lead pipes servicing their water lines. We have over 100,000 wellheads that are not capped, leaking methane. What are we doing? And by the way, we can put as many pipe fitters and miners and the rest to work capping those wells at the same price that they would charge to dig those wells. So I just find it frustrating. Talk about last point I'll make in infrastructure, and I apologize for spending more time on it, but is that if you think about it, it's the place where we will be able to significantly increase American productivity, at the same time providing really good jobs for people. But we can't build back to what they used to be. We have to build, the environment's already, global warming's already done significant damage. The roads that used to be above the water level didn't have to worry about where the drainage ditch was. Now you got to rebuild them 3 feet higher. Because it's not going to go back to what it was before. It'll only get worse unless we stop it. There's so much we can do. Look at all the schools in America. Most of you live in the Washington area now, but in your hometowns, I don't know where you're all from. How many schools where the kids can't drink the water out of the fountain? How many schools are still in a position where there's asbestos? How many schools in America we're sending our kids to don't have adequate ventilation? How many homes, buildings, office complexes are wasting billions of barrels of oil over time because they can't hold in the heat or the air conditioning because it leaks through the windows that are so porous in the connection. It's amazing. So there's so much we can do that's good stuff. Makes people healthier and creates good jobs. And I think that I got one more question here. And Janet from Univision.
Thank you, Mr. President. We too have been reporting at the border, and just like Cecilia, we ran into a pair of siblings who came in on Monday, were detained by CBP, had the phone number for their mother who lives in the U.S. We have contacted the mother as the only way they know her kids are here because CBP today, Thursday, has not contacted that mother. So when can we expect your promise of things getting better with contacting and speaking?
Well, they're already getting better, but they're going to get real. They're going to a whole hell of a lot better real quicker. We're going to hear some people leaving. Okay, we can get this done. We're going to get it done. I had a long meeting with the entire team and several cabinet level officers the other night. We're going to be moving within the next week over 100,000. I mean, 1,000 people out of the Border Patrol into safe, secure beds and facilities. We're going to significantly ramp up. We're already out there contacting everyone from getting some of the employees at HHS. There's a lot of them doing other things and move them into making those calls. We're in the process of rearranging and providing for the personnel needed to get that done. But I admire the fact that you down there, you're making the calls yourself. It's real. The next thing that has to happen, though, as you well know, has to happen. There has to be some certitude that this is the actual mom, dad, or whomever. And there's ways to do that. There's ways to do that a little bit like determining whether or not
All right.
you got the right.
I think I'm going to shut down Mr. President.
What is your dog's name? Kind of thing. I'm being a bit facetious, but not really.
Thank you, sir. All right. So, while I put that essay, Ben Rubbery, I put that, it's not even an essay, I mean, it's just a quick blog post, but while I put it up on Patreon, it's not behind any sort of paywall. Anybody can read it. That's why I posted a link to this site, Twitter. Let me close. Let's see, I'll close that and that. And we will resync this. I'm just going to go ahead and read that blog post here so anybody listening will know what we're talking about. Patreon. Here we are. So, provocative title. Whore to the fossil fuel industry? Daniel Yergin. Whore to the fossil fuel industry. Question mark? Now remember, any headline that ends with a question mark, the answer is always no. I recently listened to the audiobook of The New Map, Energy, Climate, and the Clash of Nations by Daniel Yergin. It's about the historical and technical lead-up to the shale revolution that has brought a lot of new oil and natural gas to market, and about the geopolitical consequences of this new abundance. Listening was an enjoyable experience for me. As he described developments toward the shale revolution that took place between 2007 and 2012, the years when I was fully committed to the peak oil narrative, I wondered how my life would have been different if I'd been interviewing people who were involved with those events rather than the peak oil personalities who were regular guests on my show. But the narrative of the book continues past the point at which I started to lose my faith that energy constraints would be a defining driver of events in the 2010s and 2020s. In fact, like the recent Adam Curtis documentary, Can't Get You Out of My Head, the narrative in The New Map proceeds right up to and includes the COVID-19 pandemic. Near the end of a live stream that I hosted from the Fact TV studio last night, I cited something in passing that I learned from the book, but I blanked on Daniel Yergin's name for a few minutes. When it finally came back to me, I explained to my guest, Liam Madden, that my reading a book by Daniel Yergin would be seen as proof by the remaining peak oil faithful that I had truly gone over to the dark side. Then the stream faltered, and my remarks were cut off. Venerober posted the following to the archived version of the stream. Darn, this video stops when you were saying why the peak oil community doesn't like Daniel Yergin. Well, there's ample evidence of that animosity to be found on the web. I responded to Venerober's comment by linking to a blog post from 2011 in which Jim Kunstler, I didn't say his whole name there, Jim Kunstler called Yergin the oil industry's leading prostitute, whose mission is to blow smoke up America's ass in order to keep investment dollars flowing into oil companies because oil companies prefer to use other people's money to perform their risky operations. In 2012, Jim Kunstler, Dmitry Orlov, Richard Heinberg, and Nicole Foss were all on a radio show together, and Noam Chomsky joined the conversation by phone. In response to the usual peak oil rap from all the other guests, Chomsky cited the writing of Daniel Yergin. Check out what came next. Noam Chomsky. We've switched to a totally different topic, but let me just say on the last topic that I think there's a lot of uncertainty among real specialists, not just Wall Street editors, on whether there's going to be a major U-turn, a sharp increase in hydrocarbon supplies that people like Daniel Yergin and others believe, or whether it won't. But I think that we should focus on a different aspect of this. If there's a glut, then we're in real trouble. If it turns out to be just hype, it'll be a problem. But not as bad as if we actually do get years and years, maybe as predicted, a century of ability to rely on Canadian shale and so on and so forth. That would be a real catastrophe, major catastrophe. So he doesn't spell it out right here, but what he's saying is, peak oil would be great for the environment. If we absolutely had to stop burning it because we'd basically run out, yay. But turns out there's a lot more of it in the ground than just so-called conventional oil. And, he's quoting people like Daniel Yergin who were saying that at the time. Jim Kunstler responded, I hope you don't take Mr. Yergin seriously. He's the oil industry's chief public relations prostitute. Oh, absolutely not, says Noam Chomsky. He's a serious analyst, and the same is true of the Financial Times and others, but that's missing the point. Suppose he's right. Then it's a disaster. Jim Kunstler, he's not right. Noam Chomsky, it's a disaster if there is an oil glut. Jim Kunstler, he's putting out a story to help the oil industry generate investment to generate other people's money. Noam Chomsky, that's still missing the point. The more that there is available use of hydrocarbons, the worse off we are. Jim Kunstler, that's self-evident. I'm not missing the point. And the next paragraph in this is actually worth reading. So I'm going to pop on over to that story. Is this it? Yeah, this is it. So Jim Kunstler says, that's self-evident. I'm not missing the point. And Noam Chomsky continues. Okay, that's self-evident. And therefore, we have to focus on it. The other questions are uncertain. There's a lot of debate among specialists, technical specialists, and others about just how far you can go with this, but it's kind of beside the point. The more peak oil is removed, the worse off we are, and I think that ought to be kept in mind. The point before about huge programs in the 1950s and since to shift us to a fossil fuel-based economy, and why that worked and why green technology doesn't, I don't think it's a matter of us having made that decision. That has to do with corporate profits and the government's commitment to maximizing corporate profits. The Highway Act of the 1950s was not put to public judgment any more than the development of computers and the internet was. These are government programs that are carried out in the interests of concentrations of private capital, which have an enormous influence on government policy, and the population is left out of it. Going back to your current question, there are serious economic problems with what's going on in Europe. Okay, so I'll stop there. And let's pop back to Patreon. Later in the same Clusterfuck Nation post I referenced above, Jim wrote, here's the truth about the U.S. shale plays. They will never amount to more than 1 million barrels a day in production under any circumstances. The nation uses 19 million barrels a day. And even more probably, the money will not be there to keep the shale oil coming very many years into the future, he writes in 2011. You can take that to the bank if your money has any real value when you get there and if the bank has not cratered. And then I wrote, I searched for the shale output numbers for 2020, and Google provided the following from the Houston Chronicle. Average shale production in 2020 is set to fall by 3.1% to 7.5 million barrels a day, down from 7.7 million barrels a day in 2019, according to Rystad. U.S. companies' oil well drilling and completions budget is forecast to more than halve this year to $45.2 billion, down from $98.7 billion in 2019. Please note that shale production is falling because of demand destruction brought on first by the shift to renewables and natural gas and later by COVID-19, not supply constraints. I hope that help makes it clear why my reading and making positive reference to a book on energy and geopolitics from Daniel Yergin would represent a full betrayal of my previous peak oil allegiances. Alrighty, so I invited a guy I met in Arcadia, California back in 2013 to join me on the call here. So I'm just going to send this window over to the other screen, pop over to my email, and just let him know that it's okay to call now, or okay to join the call. All right. Type. Tap. All right. And he's waiting to be admitted. Now, Venerable writes, started watching a raunchy sort of eco-fascist flavored documentary last night on Netflix, Seaspiracy. I say eco-fascist flavored because it is made by some of the people from Cowspiracy or something. Hey, Mike. How are you?
Hey, Kimo, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you? So where are you?
From your haunts, Northwest Arkansas, baby.
All
NWA.
right. Yep, my mother and brother still live there. And I'm sure I'll set foot in those parts before
Hey,
too
you
much
had some
longer.
formative times there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. My second-born son was born in Berryville. I was born in Fayetteville.
Or Burville, as it's called.
Berryville, yeah. True that. So, a guy who's often on these live streams in the comments, but he's not here today, is Ed. He lives in Montreal, but he likes to spend time in Mexico, in Sayulita, as you've mentioned. And I've been looking with increasingly thirsty eyes at Tasco, Mexico, a different Sea Realm, friend of the Sea Realm, longtime friend of the Sea Realm. He grew up there. And I've been watching videos about it, and everybody says, wow, is this Mexico or is this Italy? Because it's so gorgeous. You know, it's a densely built up city, but with all these white stucco buildings. Go ahead.
I heard your friend speaking earlier, and I didn't get a chance to look to see where Tasco is, but it sounded like a nice place.
It was until Calderon decided to ramp up the drug war and send the army against the cartels and create a power vacuum and create lots of violence. And then it got shitty, really shitty for a long time.
Sayulita, enjoys a lot of tourist trade, so it's a pretty well protected little bubble. Even I think at the peak of that violence, Sayulita was still growing. Their biggest accomplishment was putting a big old pipe a couple miles out to sea so that all their sewage didn't dump right into their surfing hole there and the beach. They were having some problems dealing with the human excrement volume there, but now that's been fixed a little bit. But I think the cool places now are further up north along the coast, maybe from Sayulita.
Yeah,
Bill Gates bought up that whole Punta Mita area, and all the Canadians hang out in Buceria. It is pretty cosmopolitan and international.
Have you heard of a place called Puerto Escondido?
is that the place you can only get into by boat?
No, you can get in by road, and I think there's an airport kind of nearby. It's in Oaxaca, but it's on the Pacific coast, and it's a surfer's paradise.
Okay.
It's considerably farther south than
Yeah,
Sayulita.
no, I think that there's still a glimmer of the old quaint surf town in Sayulita, but so many people just come up for the day from Puerto Vallarta. It gets pretty crowded on the weekends. But the cool thing is, on the weekends, they have, spontaneous parties busting out on the plaza, and it's a lot of Mexican nationals, will party there on the weekends too and go to the beach and everything, and everyone seems to get along really well. So that's cool.
How's your Spanish?
Yeah, not good.
Yeah, me neither.
I'm that kind of American tourist. I learned German in college. That doesn't help me too much. They weren't much of a colonial powerhouse.
Yeah. My Japanese doesn't do me much good outside of Japan either. And I knew that in the 90s when I went to Japan.
No, but I think the idea of living.
Go ahead.
I think living as an expat, though, it sounds like you're not afraid of it, and you've had some guests that talked about that. It always seems fascinating, potentially lonely, if you don't have a partner in crime, but and if you have a language barrier, I think.
Yeah.
But there's some great places out there.
There are. I have a potential partner in crime, but she's in the Philippines, and she doesn't speak Spanish either, although she wants to. Although a lot of people in the Philippines speak more Spanish than they realize. They were a Spanish colony for like 500 years.
I'm sorry about the lag. Probably I have a crappy satellite connection and the weather is bad, so I have a bunch of time lag, I think, on my audio.
Yeah, I'm used to it. I mean, it hasn't been a problem recently, but in the early years of the podcast, there was a lot of lag and a lot of fixing in in editing to make it flow. So let's see. Benarubber in the comments asks, "Can you still speak German? I took it in college, but it promptly left my brain. The grammar is hard for the noodle to assimilate." So how's your German?
Yeah, I like speaking German, and going over there and traveling in Germany, really helps. So it was great to finally get to go over and speak German. And, if you can just do numbers and, negotiate and barter, with a merchant, that is pretty much over half the battle. You can really get a long ways if you can kind of do that, I think.
I remember bartering with people in Thailand, and they didn't speak any English, and I didn't speak any Thai. They just had a little handheld calculator, and they'd punch out numbers and show it to me. And I was like, nah, and I'd take the calculator and punch out a different number and show it to them. And, eventually you narrow in on your final sale price. But a lot of gestures, a lot of facial, exaggerated facial
Just
gestures.
Make sure you know if you're talking baht or dollars.
Well, nobody there took dollars when I was there. It was all in baht. Hey, is it all right if I read your email on the stream here?
Oh, sure.
All right, I'll do that. I'm not going to put it up on screen. That's a new policy of mine. I don't put my email up on screen because I don't want to compromise other people's privacy by displaying their email addresses. So you wrote, "Hey Mike," or "Hey KMO." I'm KMO. You're Mike. "Hey KMO, Mike the firefighter from Arcadia here. It's been a while. Hey, the guy that set up that presentation for me in Arcadia, what's his name?"
Oh, yeah, I can't remember his name. I can't remember it either unless you...
First name John?
You stayed at his house.
I did. I interviewed him repeatedly. He wrote a book. I read it. I mean, I should know his name. Oh, well. If you don't know his name right offhand, then you can't answer my question of how's he doing. We had a bit of a falling out in 2016.
I think he might be doing okay.
Oh, good. Yeah, he and I had a bit of a falling out in 2016 over Sanders and Clinton. He was on Team Clinton. I was on Team Sanders.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, continuing. Hey, KMO.
That's interesting. Yeah, like I heard Bernie just came out in opposition to the Twitter or the social media ban on Trump. I thought that was interesting on Bernie's part recently.
Yeah, I heard his comments and they made sense to me. You know, right now
well, go ahead with the letter. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. So you're right. Hey, KMO, Mike the firefighter from Arcadia here. It's been a while, and I owe you a communique of some kind. Kudos for the longevity and arc of the C-Realm podcast. My password still works for the vault, though I never notice paying you anything on a regular basis, so I'm contemplating a suitable cash infusion, knowing that you are still firmly a gig economy participant. That is true. System D, as it's called. You know, the unofficial, unstructured economy. You're right. I was able to retire with a pension at 52. That's how old I am now. I'm about to turn 53. I was able to retire with a pension at 52, so that part of my life planning has seriously paid off, and I've been fortunate enough to travel quite a bit since then. So I just worked a couple more years after I met you in Arcata. I ended up in Bishop at my last post over the east side of the Sierras. I need to make this font a little bigger. Give me just a sec here. My eyes get older by the day. Let's see. I was able to assemble some of the folks I had worked with in Yosemite, where I had been previously for 8 years with the National Park Service. I retired by the end of 2015 before the 2016 election really heated up. Since then, I still do gig work in the summer, helping out with the wildfires, doing fire behavior modeling and strategic planning. That sounds pretty cool. In the interim, my last adopted parent passed away, condolences, and their generous inheritance for their only adopted son has ensured that I won't have to eat cat food in my elderly years on Social Security with a meager civil service pension. I am an example of the decreased middle-class expectations currently being experienced by many Gen Xers and millennials. My adopted father was a veterinarian with a PhD and a tenure at a major university, while I never married and only made it to a civil service career, but I'm not complaining, especially after the more recent events in our nation's history. Hell, I made it out of Northwest Arkansas not being a racist redneck and not addicted to opioids. I made it to the smug coastal elitism and am addicted to the good weed. Seriously, though, I do think you have nailed the wrong-headedness of many liberals who have never been to our neck of the woods. I still spend half a year in Arkansas, where I spend a lot of time out in Newton County on a bit of special property right on the upper Buffalo River. So I can slide back into the accent and adopt the customs easily enough. And you're right, so many folk feel threatened by the cancel culture and the perception of there being some attack on Christianity, traditional values, rights of gun owners, blah, blah. I think at the root of the problem is malicious social media-coded AI that fuels misinformation, disinformation, and disunity. I salute your walking away from Facebook. Okay, I must repeat, I was kicked off of Facebook. I did not leave voluntarily.
It's the same difference. It's good.
Yeah, I could have come slinking back under a different name, but I didn't. I spent a lot of time between the election and insurrection trolling conservative folks trapped in the dopamine cycle and COVID isolation. I had lost a close college friend early to the QAnon phenomenon and feel fortunate not to have dropped into that rabbit hole myself. Internet memes can be intoxicating, and I think I first connected with your work during your doom phase, which happened to coincide with mine after the financial crash of 2008. I think I was working out how to sort the internet wheat from the chaff around that time, and I know there was a powerful fast crash vibe swirling around the peak oil movement, a movement squelched by the fracking boom, and more importantly, America as energy independent meme, both of which will likely be short-lived phenomenon. I was swept up in that and waiting on your weekly podcasts with bated breath, but as time went on, and it became apparent the powers that be weren't going to let things collapse that easily. So like you, I moved on. But I have no regrets, as I learned much about the power of internet conspiracies, if you will, and I was much better prepared than most, psychologically, if not physically, when COVID came around. I think that experience armored me to the allure of something like QAnon. I had seen the endless predictions of doom that failed to materialize. For example, Mike Rupert, rest in peace, Calente, not sure who that is, Kunstler, and I saw that in the Q thing. But hey, conspiracies are not why I'm writing. I have a friend who has bought a house outside of Sayulita in an off-the-grid eco-community. I won't mention your friend's name here, but I've been down there several times and would love to chat about it. I think Sayulita is a little too touristy for what you're looking for, though it started out as a quaint surfer destination. The sweet spot is moving north, up the coast, like San Pancho and Lo de Marcos. I've also considered at times becoming an expat in East or Southeast Asia, Mexico, even the EU, though that seems like an expensive proposition. I was poking around in my ancestry, giving the corporations my genetic code, I've done the same, hoping I might qualify for an EU passport with enough Irish ancestry, but I discovered a half-brother and my still-kicking biological mother both in Florida. That was a nice COVID holiday gift. It's nice to have family again, and we are planning to meet up. As soon as everyone is stabbed and jabbed, I hope we can catch up sometime. And talking about living in foreign lands, climate change, or wildfires is always something for which I can always find the time. I still blog, not much since last summer, under my name and pseudonym at fuse.org. All right. So yeah, a little trip down memory lane, and I had.
Yeah, that's a.
Go ahead.
Well, I was mostly sad for you because you've expressed like kind of regret for the DIN years, to some degree when you were in that same point and with the peak oil crowd, and I don't know. I think I learned a lot from that moment in time anyway. So I don't really have a lot of regret. I'm not sure I could have been thinking about anything much more. I don't know. I'm not much of a technologically determinist, and so thinking about AI and what the tech guys are doing, I'm not sure that would have been more useful time spent. But I really enjoyed all of the work you did and all the guests you brought together, and your style of talking to folks and doing interviews has always been great, I think.
Well, thank you. Back in the early days of the podcast, somebody sent me a donation in Bitcoin. They sent me 5 Bitcoin. I didn't know what to do with it. I created a temporary wallet and I stashed it away, and then I forgot all about it. I have no idea where that is, but those 5 Bitcoin would be worth $250,000 right now. So wish I had them. I wish I'd paid attention to Bitcoin starting from that day. But at the time, I did the math, and it was worth less than $5. I was like, how much trouble am I going to go to collect this $5?
Yeah, well, I kind of had negative associations with Bitcoin because it was my best friend from college who I lost to the QAnonymous phenomenon. He and his partner had been mining Bitcoin for a while early in that whole scene, and then they gave up. No. This is a guy who was burying nickels around in his yard because the value of a nickel in nickel ore is supposedly more than 5 cents. So he was like, hoarding nickels around his yard. But he went down that rabbit hole so far that I think he may have lost his family over it.
Mm. Yeah, to lose your family over QAnon silliness, man. I mean, there is a serious, respectable side to the peak oil scene. I don't believe there is a serious, respectable side to the QAnon conspiracy. I don't think there's much of a continuum there.
Yeah, but at the same time, there are conspiracies, right? I mean, we have to keep our feelers out there for that one conspiracy that actually is real that it might be helpful to know about. But I don't know. Sometimes I just think I'm ready to be the guy like the guy in the Matrix who just will take the steak dinner.
Yeah, give me the blue pill, make me somebody important, like an actor. And the character's name was Mr. Reagan. The implication being that he got put back in the Matrix and he got to be Ronald Reagan.
Hey, how's your buddy from down south that you did all the Z-Realm stuff with? Marty?
Yep, Marty. He lives in North Carolina, in Greensboro, and he's still doing his thing. He's got a podcast that I think he still does. It's called Flickers from the Cave, and he and a friend of his, they watch very sort of esoteric old movies that you probably never heard of, low budget shock films from different countries. And I think they have a small but pretty dedicated following that sticks with them for, years on end. And like so many a small podcaster who keeps it up, they develop a core audience who sticks with them. So my audience, my audience was half peak oil and half psychedelics. And I haven't been doing psychedelics recently, and I'm not much interested in talking about it. And a lot of the people who are big into who are the big figures in the psychedelic scene, they're on the coasts, they're the educated elite, and they're deep, deep team blue. And so they don't return my emails anymore. And, I don't really care to talk about peak oil anymore. So my whole stable of, repeat guests, I don't invite them back anymore. So it's just really easy for me to go, weeks at a time, or like I think I got out 12 free podcasts last year, about one a month. But really, most of my podcasting efforts go into the, behind the paywall Vault podcast. So that doesn't reach any new audience, So,
Yeah.
But the nice thing about that is that the people who are still on board, the ones who have been with me I started the Vault in 2012. So a lot of them, got on the ground floor 9 years ago. These are the people who, either had some resonance with the psychedelic side of things or some resonance with the collapse side of things, but I'm not talking about either one of those things anymore. And they've evolved with me, they've moved away from those subjects with me. And, I don't hear from many of them.
Yeah, no, that's right.
But, I do hear from people from time to time who say, yeah, I was into this back then when you were into this, and now I'm not. And I'm glad you're not. But, it's a tiny fraction of what the audience was back in like 2010, 2011, when I was really into it.
Well, I still go to some of those same voices, but I know you have a close friendship with Kunstler, and I made some rash statements to you when I hardly knew you when I first met you about him. But man, I really felt like he was really pandering to that Q Anonymous crowd there a little bit right there towards the election and insurrection period. I was having a hard time with some of the stuff. I felt like that he knew what was up, but was just had kind of a clientele that he was serving.
Yeah, that's a danger. I mean, when you make your money appealing to a particular audience, you need to continue to appeal to that audience. Even if as a whole the audience is drifting to someplace pretty nutty. If you want them to keep coming back to your blog and keep listening to your podcast, you better give them something they're interested in. So, to some extent, I count myself as lucky for not having built a big audience around, the collapse narrative, because I have no patience for it anymore. No interest in continuing to talk about it, except as this is where I've been, and this is why I don't take this stuff seriously anymore.
Oh, I think you nailed it in one episode of your podcast where you talked about the dynamic of the collapsnik, of the equating it to our monkey brain, how we're typically only suited to work in small groups of a few dozen, and you've got all these people out there just buried in some super hierarchy that want to see things change so bad, and they want to lead their merry band of people, because their ideas are so much better into the post like apocalyptic world. It is kind of an exercise in egoism, I think, for sure. And you can see where it would come from too, because of the state of so many people's lives.
Yeah. I mean, for a lot of people, life really sucks, and a collapse, it seems like a break. It seems like, the light at the end of the tunnel, even if, as soon as you come out of the tunnel, you go over a cliff, at least you're not having to do this horrible, thankless job anymore, which doesn't keep you ahead of your bills and, doesn't give you any sort of sense of self-respect or accomplishment. You'd rather see the whole thing crash than see it continue as is with you in a shitty place in the whole structure. But it's not going to collapse because the people at the top want to stay at the top of, a structure. They're not going to let that structure collapse. And that's a point John Michael Greer's been making for many years.
Well, Yeah. No, Greer was on the long collapse thing for a long time, and I like him. I still only can take him kind of in small doses. I don't read him constantly. His stuff is pretty thick to power through, but he's great. I like him still, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, and we've said, I've said, you've said critical things of Jim Kunstler, but he's a dedicated writer, and he's a guy who is making his living through self-expression, and maybe appealing to a certain demographic. It's not as an uncompromised self-expression as it may have once been. But he's also a musician. He plays with at least one band. He plays guitar and violin, and he's got a huge garden. So he's not just sitting at a keyboard typing out
Renaissance
stuff.
Guy.
Yeah. I mean, he's living a respectable life from my perspective. And he's a fun guy to be around. He was a drama major in college, and he's a cantankerous personality, and he's turned that into a career, and it's a lot of fun. But in person, like, he's a super gracious host. If I go to his house, he's just all about my comfort. Can I get you this? Can I get you that? Great cook. He makes good food. Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
you guys had some good episodes where you're just sitting around a kitchen table at his house. That was nice.
Yeah, those are fun episodes. And usually the night before there was drinking and smoking of weed and much less structured conversation that was equally fun, but not one that I could really share with an audience. Yeah.
Well, I knew as soon as I retired and got out from under the huge, ginormous hierarchy of the federal government. I mean, I started receiving that regular pension check in the mail. All of a sudden, I didn't want things to collapse right away anymore. At that point, myself, it's like,
funny how that works.
It's like, oh, okay, that's cool. If the powers can make this continue to happen until I die. But now my concern is, the future generations and the youth. I mean, as a privileged old white guy, I'm pretty much at the point of just like sort of stepping back and like giving my resources and whatever I can to the youth. I mean, that's where it's their world that they're going to inherit, and that's what having no kids of my own. It's kind of weird, but it's sort of in that sense, I see all the kids of the world as my own, really, in more of a holistic, I guess, Buddhist sort of way.
I'm kind of the opposite. I mean, I have two kids of my own, so I'm invested in the future because they're me going forward. But at the same time, I see so many of the youth around here just utterly brainwashed by all the woke nonsense. And I was watching a documentary about the youth protests in Hong Kong right now. And, the Chinese government has really come down hard on them, but their initial complaints were really overblown and hyperbolic, and they brought it down on themselves. I mean, the Chinese government, the Communist Party, wasn't looking to really eliminate the vestiges of democracy or, the pretense of democracy in Hong Kong. There was just this extradition nonsense, between Hong Kong and Taipei, I think, the Republic of China, not the People's Republic, but, Taiwan. And so the Chinese Communist Party just made a sort of necessary, not sweeping, but scary sounding change to extradition law, which was going to affect next to nobody. But a bunch of kids blew that way out of proportion and thought, the Communist Party's coming down on us to, crush us and make us slaves. And they went out into the streets to start protesting. And if they had just shrugged their shoulders and said, yeah, whatever, and gone back to playing video games or whatever, things would be a lot better in Hong Kong than they are now. But if you challenge the power of the Chinese Communist Party, well, then they have to assert that power. And so, I was listening to the statements of these kids, and they were just so hyperbolic and so overblown. And then just this past year, with the whole, gosh, I should bring his name to mind. It's caused so much damage. The guy who got his neck kneeled on for so long, and he died. Who am I thinking of? What's his name? Like, I couldn't think of
No,
Daniel.
no, don't catch two white guys and forgetting his name. Oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
What was it? Derek Chauvin is the guy that did it. I can remember that guy's name, but I can't remember. George Floyd.
There you
my
go.
God.
All right, you've saved us both.
Jesus, that was like going to be like a major
Well, I think you'd be safe in Northwest Arkansas, but here in New England.
If anybody actually is watching this, they'll be like, "Yeah, you would have thought of the cop's name first."
Well, anyway, George Floyd and the whole, fallout of the George Floyd death, all the protests. Here I am in Vermont. Vermont, I don't know the exact statistics, but it's something on the order of 97% white. And here in Bellows Falls, we have a few black people, but there's no black population. There's no black community. But we had this huge Black Lives Rally march, and it's just a bunch of white kids marching around the streets, with their signs and whatnot. And I went to watch them, not to march with them, not to participate, but to watch them and shoot some video. And I could spot certain people in the crowd who were also marching, and I thought, okay, that guy's a multimillionaire, and that guy's a multimillionaire, and everybody else is on their ass broke. And the multimillionaires are the ones, who are in there marching saying Black Lives Matter, because, that takes the attention right off of the vast disparities of wealth that I see on display right in front of me. And so they march around, they go down to this place where they're going to give talks, and these white kids all get together, and one of them stands up in front of the rest with a bullhorn and shouts about how terrible white people are in a very, very angry voice. And then, pass the bullhorn to somebody else, and somebody else shouts about how terrible white people are. And I'm like, this is not doing anybody any good. And you are totally oblivious to a whole host of economic and socio-political and technological forces which are fucking ruining your future. And you're screaming about how terrible white people are. And then I was walking away from this, and I was talking to somebody else. Actually, I was with Olga. And she was talking to a friend of hers, and the friend of hers was saying, "Oh, the young people are really on it. They're really keen. They really understand." And I didn't say anything. Just internally, I'm just rolling my eyes. It's like, oh, please. This place is so dysfunctional. You don't have to invoke white supremacy.
I get to work with both sides of that.
Oh, do you?
I get to work with both sides of that. I can meld into the whole red state thing, but I can see where they're offended and concerned, and but at the same time, I work with a lot of woke kids in the climate movement in Eugene, is where I'm at on the West Coast now, and so it's the whole woke thing. Like, I don't know, I'm told that even the use of the term virtue signaling is triggering. I think it's a very apt term, it seems to be a thing. I mean, to me, nothing has disgusted me more with the Democrats really in the short term than that appearance they did where they all knelt with the African fabrics around their necks, displaying their, I don't know, whatever sensitivity to African culture, but it just seems absurd. I mean, to the people in the countryside, I can see why it appears to be something that they don't want any part of, and that is being shoved down their throats, kind of,
Now, the thing to tell the red state folks, to reassure them, is, look, the lefties mostly go after each other. They're mostly policing each other, looking for any sort of, hint of heresy. If you're out in the sticks and your employer is just as conservative as you are, you're fine. Don't worry about it. There's nothing they can do to you.
Right. Right. Yeah. I had a roommate. He was the son of my best friend who founded Fusea. It's an environmental nonprofit. And he was an ex-environmental, radical, and his son is very much a Eugene kid, but he has ended up with a pretty decent job at the tire store, the Les Schwab store over in Springfield on the other side of the river where all the rednecks live and work. So supposedly, even though it's being gentrified now. But yeah, he had a hard time in the run up to the election with his workmates. But of course, since the election, half of, or pretty much all of his, he got COVID and was out, and then had a little ski injury and was out for a while. He had paid medical leave, and now he's back, and his ex-detractors are gone, and they love having him back at the store because he's like an old veteran now, and things have calmed down, it seems like, since the election. But it was pretty ugly there in the tire shop for a little while for the youngster, for the young 21-year-old who was, accused every day of being a BLMer or an Antifa or this or that, by his tire shop accusers.
Now, was this
he had
in
a good job, and it paid benefits, and that was good for him.
Was this in Springfield, Missouri?
Oh no, that's in Oregon.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that Springfield, Missouri would be all that woke.
Is, Eugene Sisters.
Gotcha.
No, not at all.
So I'm interested to hear about your travels. You mentioned you've traveled quite a bit since you retired. Where have you been?
Well, I've been to Thailand a few times. I could have easily have been that guy from America that never had a passport, never traveled, if it hadn't been for one girlfriend I had, and I really have to hand it to her. And we went to Thailand, I think, back in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I've gotten my second passport, and I've been back there 2 or 3 times. I did a great, I guess it was a 2-month trip, I think, 2 or 3 month trip after I retired to Europe. I finally went over there and started in Greece and the Greek islands, and was doing a lot of hiking up there. It's a lot like California, really nice Mediterranean climate, beautiful in the springtime with the flowers, and just really dynamite. So I remember I got to Greece on May Day. I flew into Athens on the day before May Day, so I got to enjoy the May Day parades there in Athens, and made my way eventually to Italy and Cinque Terre, and did some hiking, between villages, both in Cinque Terre and up in the the area to the north of Paris that has all the farm stays and the wine country. But that kind of the hill town wine country area.
I've never been to France, never been to Europe, but are you talking about Provence?
Yeah, exactly, Provence. That's right. And then was going to go to Rome. It was bloody hot, and I didn't want any more heat. That actually had some firefighters had died in some wildfires, I think in Portugal that summer. It really dried out, so I headed to Germany, where I had been so long, over a month, where I had been out of the area where I spoke the language. I didn't speak Greek, I didn't speak Italian. I was just jonesing to communicate with somebody in any way I could. So I'm like, I got to go to Germany, where at least I have a rudimentary understanding of the language. And
well, everybody speaks English in Germany,
up there anyway. But so that was great. And then bopped around Germany and up to Norway, and I love it. I've been to Amsterdam 2 or 3 times too. And then I ended up with my college trip of it's run through the Alumni Association, an international trip to Iceland, where I joined a bunch of my ex schoolmates from Carleton College, and actually one of my roommates, an art professor there. He'd been an art major when I was there. He was one of the trip leaders, so that was really cool. And we bopped around Iceland, but that was really structured. All the other stuff had been me just kicking it and cruising around on trains and making my own way. I didn't really like all the structure of the Iceland piece, because it was made more for I don't know. It was just a lot more structured.
Yeah.
There was lots of. I wished I could have been more independent when I was there.
I think
Where
most
all have
people
you traveled. Have you've been
Go ahead.
quite a few places?
Yeah, and I'm thinking about traveling again.
Where all have you traveled? You've been quite a few places.
Well, I lived in Japan twice, and I've been to South Korea.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I've been to Peru 4 times, seeking that that ayahuasca vision, and lived in Australia for a time. Been to Thailand a few times. Couple jaunts across the border in Mexico, but it was by car, so I didn't get very far south. It's about it in Canada, and all over the U.S. I've never been.
Did you make it to?
Go ahead.
Did you make it to Laos or Cambodia when you were in Thailand? Any of your Thailand trips?
So when one of my Thailand trips, I've got a friend who lives there, and he lives in Chiang Mai, and we all piled into his truck, and we drove to a mountain town. I forget the name of it, but it's ethnically Chinese local population, and they grow tea there. And if you go up on the mountain and you look down, you can see over into Burma. I mean, it's right there. So I got as close to Burma as that, or Myanmar, but I've never crossed the border. But that was a fun trip. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, one of my best memories from travel is drinking Laotian whiskey out of plastic soda bottles with a bunch of Laotian river guides. I went out with a guy in his water taxi, kind of by myself, at sunset in the capital. I think it's Luang Prabang, and I believe that's the capital of Laos. And we ended up out on this sandbar island with all the other boatmen, just drinking Laotian whiskey, and they thought I was the funniest thing. I was a big, tall, white guy, and I thought they were the funniest things. And we just rolled around laughing and drinking like Laotian whiskey for a while until I had to make them take me back to the other side of the river. But that was just one of those things that you only get with travel,
So I'm thinking about traveling again. I won't be able to travel. I won't be able to get a passport until all my child support obligations are discharged. But that'll be within the next couple of years. But when I start traveling again, I'm going to have to continue to make money while I travel. So I'm looking at places that are affordable and that have a digital nomad scene already in place. Other international type adventurous folks that I can collaborate with and enjoy their company, because you meet some great people while traveling. And I just hear great things about Tbilisi, Georgia. I've watched many videos about the place and read many a trip report, and it's like this magical place, and it's just dirt cheap. But very modern amenities, and you can rent a nice modern apartment, well equipped, and it's like $300-400 a month. I mean, I could go for that.
Is Georgia like part of the EU now, or are they're not really considered? I mean, they're like broke away from the Soviet Union back when the Soviet Union broke up, right?
Yeah, they were a part of the Soviet Union. They border Armenia, Azerbaijan, and I guess what is this, Ukraine? So I mean, it's conceivable that they might end up being part of Russia again. But, not in the immediate future. But yeah. But really, Mexico, the more I look at Mexico, the more attractive it is. Go ahead.
Yeah. What did you say about Mexico?
Just the more I read about it, and the more I learn about, living there, the more attractive it becomes.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty neat thing. You can't own property within a certain distance of the coast as a foreign national.
100 miles.
But you can if you live back in the jungle a ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in all your deed and everything, you just pretty much have to trust the government and the bank, but like the American government, I don't think the Mexican government's going anywhere anytime soon. So
Right.
it
No,
seems pretty stable, relatively speaking, I think.
I've heard some nightmare stories though about people, making arrangements, buying property, putting their life savings into it, and just having it stolen right out from under them with, legal chicanery. So I would be a perpetual renter in Mexico, no question.
Yeah, that could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do have I think they've got a good infrastructure. I think that like in Sayulita, they've got fast internet, and there's tons of digital nomads, in that area. Buceria, just up the coast from Puerto Vallarta, is booming big time. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't have, I think, fiber optic all the way up to Sayulita, I would imagine.
We have Leszek from Poland who's joined us in the chat. He says, I was too old to find out that Mr. Whiskey wasn't Polish. What a disappointment. Whiskey, W-I-S-K-I. I don't know what he's referencing, if that's just a pun. He's talking about all whiskey. Explain yourself, Les.
Mr. Whiskey. That wasn't the guy from the Matrix. That was somebody else, right?
Reagan.
The state guy. That was not Mr. Reagan. I was Reagan Whiskey. That's all the same.
Oh, you mean Keanu Reeves' character? It was Mr. Anderson.
Okay.
I could just hear Viggo. What's his name? Viggo. Who played Elrond in Lord of the Rings? He was also Agent Smith in The Matrix, and I can just hear him saying, Mr. Anderson.
Well, I'm not sure which was more of a sentient movie, as far as seeing into the future, The Matrix or the Idiocracy. Idiocracy was not supposed to be a documentary, that was supposed to be a comedy.
Yeah, I've got my issues with Idiocracy. I mean, it really is taking a very elitist point of view toward working class people, saying, look how stupid these people are. If we put them in charge, it would be a complete disaster. But as far as I can tell, rule by knowledgeable experts hasn't really turned out all that great either. The alternative, the direct.
Yeah, who was the author of who was the author of What's the Matter with Kansas? Thomas Frank.
Yeah,
I think Thomas Frank has got that right. Definitely, it is that that disdain for the working class that is just destroying the Democratic Party, in my humble opinion.
I'd put that in the past tense. It is done, destroyed. I mean, there's still a power structure, but in terms of representing working people, that's history. They're long past that. So there's a huge opening, I think. I mean,
so far the only.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Oh, I get to rant on these things all day.
I think like the only. I could too. I think the only decent progressive cabinet pick hardly we got was the gal for the Interior Department. She's like a rebel. I like her. She's cool.
What's her name?
She's been involved in a lot of the Holland, I think. I believe. And Manchin was like doing his thing of like, I don't know if I can go for her, but I think he finally caved in.
Let's see.
But she's Native American, and
Deb Holland, yeah. Oh, looks like we've hit a serious piece of lag.
A pretty, I'd say maybe might be the. Yeah, the weather's not getting any better here. Tell me if I have to just jettison.
Yeah, well, I really do need to get to drawing here pretty soon. Let's see. What do we got from Les here?
Yeah, it's good to talk to you, man.
No, it's simple. Whiskey because of the ski ending. Okay, my next question. What makes you pretend to squirm? What makes me pretend to squirm? Nothing comes to mind, but I'll keep that question in mind, and if I think of something, I'll let you know. Mike, is there anything that causes you to pretend to squirm? There's lots of things that make me really squirm, actually squirm, but nothing that I can think of that I pretend to squirm over.
Yeah, exactly. I just appreciate the times I'm not squirming.
Yeah. Hey, where do you like to go in Thailand?
Oh, I like Chiang Mai. I like the north. The mountains are good, in particular. But you know, I love the east too. Isan is fine. Just anywhere. The cities are kind of rough. I don't like all the working girls and all that, but I like to get out of the cities. But I don't know. I like northern Thailand quite a bit. Those islands are so amazing too, like Koh Samui and Koh Tao, and the little islands down there around where they filmed the one James Bond movie, where you've got those limestone islands that just kind of come out of the sea like mushrooms. That's really a neat area.
And the beach. Do you see that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio?
Yeah.
The beach.
Yep.
Same location.
Yep. I definitely like the beaches there. Anywhere where I can relax and just take in some sun and sand is nice. I've been to Jamaica a bunch, actually. I really like Negril, Jamaica. The poverty in Jamaica is kind of crushing. And the last time I went there, I took a van ride into Kingston and stayed in Kingston, and that was interesting, and went up to the coffee plantations in the Blue Mountains above Kingston. All that Blue Mountain coffee has gotten bought up by the Japanese recently, and it's kind of hard to find it anywhere, but it's incredibly good coffee. But Negril has got some, beautiful cliffs that run down into the ocean, and I'm really partial to that area too. Is nice. Thai's a hard language to learn. I don't know if you've ever tried to tackle Thai.
No, just a few
I tried
phrases.
a little bit, but it's tough.
Yeah. No, my friend who lives there, he lives in Chiang Mai, and he's fluent.
That's part of the cool. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I think that would be very helpful.
Oh, we've lost sound. Hey, Mike, I can't hear you anymore. I can see your lips are moving, but I don't hear any sound. Huh. Well, I think the tech gods have stepped in to say it's time to bring this segment to an end. But hey, send me some.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, send me some information about your friend's community in near Sayulita. I'd be interested to hear about that.
Okay, I don't know if you can still hear me, but there is a link in that email.
Oh, okay.
To that community.
I can still hear you, and I will
Check
follow that link later
good
on.
Yeah, good to talk to you, man.
Yeah, good to reconnect with you. Take care.
Yeah, see ya.
All righty. That was fun. Let's see. Let's get the chat back up. Oh, Parker's here. All right. And Daniel's going to be reporting us to the DNC. We couldn't remember George Floyd's name. And Mike remembered Chauvin. Is that the cop's name? So the guy that I was just talking to, his name's Mike. He is from Northwest Arkansas, near where my family lives, but I never met him in Arkansas. I met him in Arcata, California in 2013 when Olga and I were there on the Manifesting and Meat Space tour. That was one of the best stops on that whole tour. The guy who organized it, he's a volunteer firefighter there, and so he knew Mike, the guy we were just talking to, but he arranged to have an audience. I mean, he was part of I think it may have been a transition town community there, or some sort of organized community that regularly brought in speakers to talk about issues, related to peak oil and preparedness and collapse and that sort of thing. And they had a great venue. It was a church. I had a wireless lav mic on. It was just a quality production. And I met Mike there. I met another longtime Sea Realm listener that I'd corresponded with for years, but had never met in person. He was there. And that was just a good experience. It was a good time. So, hey, Mushroom Mike, the guy I was just talking to, he has a friend who is living in an eco-community in Mexico, sort of near Sayulita, near Puerto Vallarta. And we were going to talk about that, but then we ended up talking about all manner of other stuff, including travel all over the world and how if you're a right-winger living out in the countryside, you're really not in any danger from cancel culture, because the cancel culture peeps, they tend to focus on their own. They look for weakness among their own, and they attack them. So if you're just nobody minding your own business out in the middle of nowhere, you're safe from cancel culture anyway. If you live in Northwest Arkansas, there's still the brown recluse spiders. They're not deadly for the most part, but man, it sucks to get bit by them because your flesh starts to liquefy. That was my parting gift just before I left Tennessee and moved to New York City. I got a big old brown recluse spider bite on my hip, and I just had this patch of flesh there with this continually just gooey and liquidy for, I don't know, a few weeks. Finally, it went away. Les says, hey, KMO, I loved your vid about the stupid masks. You mean the live stream last night from the TV station? I'm so over the freaking masks. I'm so over this whole pandemic response. All right. How you doing, Mike? All right. I'm going to put the glove on. I'm going to launch some sort of drawing program and at least get something that I can post to Instagram tomorrow. Mike says, Bach? Is that beach? Beach life, it's there. Beef life Mexico is there. Beach life, yes. I'm against tsunamis. Never spend much time in coasts. No thanks. Do tsunamis ever hit the Pacific coast of Mexico? I don't ever recall having heard of a tsunami hitting there and causing much destruction. Mike says, I've been over the mask since day 14. Yeah. Oh, boy. All righty. Let's move this on over and launch something. Actually, there's a couple things I wanted to read. Other than my own blog post, that's pretty hubristic there. Let's see. So this will be stuff from this will be stuff from the Discord server. All right. Let's start with this one. How and why companies will engineer your emotions. The booming sector of affective computing relies on collecting massive amounts of behavioral and emotional data. This is a guest post. The views expressed here are solely those of the author and do not represent positions of the IEEE spectrum or the IEEE, which is an engineering organization. I don't know exactly what IEEE stands for. Let's look it up. Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. Okay, that makes sense. All right, enjoy that salad. So where's that article? Here it is. I have two of them open, it looks like. All right. So again, the title is How and why companies will engineer your emotions. The booming sector of affective computing relies on collecting massive amounts of behavioral and emotional data. Technology has become more physically and psychologically intimate, which has created a demand for new technologies that can infer emotional states from humans. The term affective computing was coined in 1995 by Professor Rosalind Picard, founder and director of the Affective Computing Research Group at the MIT Media Lab. She recognized the extent to which emotions governed our lives and decided to drive forward the concept of engineering emotion. What is affective computing? Affective computing systems are being developed to recognize, interpret, and go ahead, Mr. Loud Engine Dude, you can pass on by. I won't compete. That's what happens when the weather gets nice around here. Out come the loud engines, many of them motorcycles. Affective computing systems are being developed to recognize, interpret, and process human experiences and emotions. They all rely on extensive human behavioral data, captured by various kinds of hardware and processed by an array of sophisticated machine learning software applications. I'm going to pause here and say, remember the story about the Amazon delivery drivers who don't actually work for Amazon, they work for contractors who can have up to a maximum, they can manage up to a maximum of 40 vans. So, if their workforce were to unionize, Amazon can just sever the contract with that particular contractor, that particular management corporation, and those 40 workers are just cut loose. And they don't officially work for Amazon, but they drive an Amazon branded van and they wear an Amazon branded uniform, but they're not employees of Amazon, so they don't get the benefits that a full-time employee is entitled to. But one of the things that really burned these guys' bread was that Amazon had installed these cameras that are constantly watching the facial expressions of the drivers, and you can get dinged in terms of your performance if you yawn while driving. And there's all kinds of other, it's searching for micro emotions. But my thought is that the purpose of putting those cameras in the vans probably isn't so much to monitor the drivers as it is to collect facial data about them, simply to amass large data sets for training AI. I don't know that that's the case. That's just the thought that occurs to me. So, affective computing systems are being developed to recognize, interpret, and process human experiences and emotions. They rely on extensive human behavioral data captured by various kinds of hardware and processed by an array of sophisticated machine learning software applications. AI-based software lies at the heart of each system's ability to interpret and act on users' emotional cues. These systems identify and link nuances in behavioral data with the associated emotion. The most obvious types of hardware for collecting behavior data are cameras and other scanning devices that monitor facial expressions, eye movements, gestures, and postures. This data can be processed to identify subtle micro-expressions that a human assessment might struggle to identify consistently. What's more, high-end audio equipment records variances and textures in users' voices. Some insurance companies are experimenting with call voice analytics that can detect if someone is lying to their claim handlers. The team working on IBM's question answering computer system, Watson, has developed a tone analyzer that uses linguistic analysis to detect 3 types of tones from text: language style, emotion, and social tendencies. Virtual reality gear, head-mounted displays, for example, is being developed to create increasingly realistic simulated experiences. The technology enables the game to adapt based on the emotion of the user, creating a more personal and exciting, stimulating experience. How is effective computing used by companies? Many companies are looking to effective computing to capture mass data about consumer reactions to their advertising campaigns. One of the most notable innovators in the retail space, Realize, works with big-name brands such as Coca-Cola, Expedia, Mars, AT&T, and LG, who deploy the technology to help them measure, optimize, and compare the effectiveness of their content. The Realize software measures viewers' emotions and attention levels using webcams. It can show a brand's content to panels of consenting consumers all around the world and measure how audiences respond to a campaign by monitoring their attention levels and logging moments of maximum engagement. Marketers are provided with an overall score based on attention and emotional engagement, which enables them to compare multiple assets or benchmark them against previous campaigns. Microsoft's Human Understanding and Empathy team is working on various projects with the aim of implementing effective computing into their products. This includes developing a multimodal emotion sensing platform that combines computer vision analysis of facial expression and body pose with audio processing that detects speech and sentiment. Together, they enable the system to generate computational models of conversation that better reflect emotions. What are the ethical issues in effective computing? There's inevitable fear and uncertainty surrounding developments in AI technology, and effective computing is no different. Marketing companies may have trouble gathering large amounts of personal data from audiences, as they'll have to make sure that all participants have consented. This would make it difficult to gather information about everyday advertising to the masses. Yet it's easy to imagine that one day soon, TV sets will have cameras and microphones that can pick up reactions to shows and commercials, and that those reactions will be monitored by the media industry. This possibility creates huge privacy and data protection issues, and it's the biggest obstacle for companies. Effective computing pioneer Picard is fervently against the use of effective computing for unethical purposes. Well, who's going to say that they're for unethical purposes? Anyway, in a recent interview, she said that she has lost out on a significant amount of money for not selling products to companies that plan to collect data without people's consent. Well, good for her. Really. Picard's hopes for effective computing lie within its ability to help people communicate better. For instance, effective computing can help people with autism communicate the emotions they struggle to vocalize. Some years back, her research group made a glove that had sensors on the palm to monitor emotional responses. The glove could recognize when a person was experiencing moments of frustration, which could potentially help prevent emotional distress. The same device could be used to monitor stress during a child's school day. Within the Black Dog Institute, an Australian mental health clinical services group, and Reach Out, a similar group that aims to help young people, there is considerable interest in harnessing affective computing for a range of social benefits. Slawomir Nasuto, professor of cybernetics at the University of Reading in the UK, believes these technologies could be easily integrated with public sector infrastructures. Nasuto envisions the introduction of computerized tutoring within schools. The technology could be used to recognize the mental state of the students, including stress or attention, that signify whether the learners are struggling, interested, or bored. On the basis of that input, the system could adjust the difficulty of the problem, style of explanation, or pace of delivery to keep the students engaged. Nasuto has also explored how a similar system could be deployed in hospitals' intensive care wards. Patients undergoing operations, particularly after a traumatic event, are highly stressed and face potential cognitive impairment post-operation. He says that, quote, non-pharmaceutical interventions such as music may help to reduce the levels of anxiety that the patient is suffering. That, in turn, may enable the clinicians to lower the doses of medications that the patient is receiving, close quote. Affective computing has faced and will continue to face aversion from those who question the intentions behind its use. However, if used safely and ethically, affective computing may become a significant part of our everyday lives. I think it will become a significant part of our everyday lives regardless of whether it is used effectively and ethically. As Nasuto says, quote, effective computing is a tool, and any tool can be used for either good or nefarious purposes. What is specific here is the pervasiveness of effective computing via online connectivity and the emergence of cheaper and more networked sensing technologies. Together, they will open the way for the collection of unprecedented volumes of data, I think that means to say, on the human state, close quote. All right. Well, that was all very general. I was expecting something more specific from that. Let's see. Okay. Hey, Parks. Les says, I just had an epiphany. Do you want to know what it is? Parker says, oh, yeah? No one likes me when I'm inebriated. I feel like a genius. Parker says, masks might block corporate facial surveillance. or they might just present a modicum of challenge that corporate surveillance, particularly AI-based surveillance, can easily overcome. There's a sweet spot for alcohol intoxication, but it's difficult not to overshoot it. And what's more, it's subjective. I mean, if you're considerably drunker than the person you're talking to, you become annoying. If both parties are equally intoxicated, you can both be annoying and not really know, not really mind. Les says, yep, but at intoxication point, masks are stupid and superfluous, and I tell everyone so. Parker says, communication through the facial emotions is really basic. It's a major way that parents connect with babies. Yes, says Lessig, but before babies, there's me. I'll tell you, you're an idiot first. Parker, if this technology advances enough, maybe then AI can raise human children. Well, that's not anything I'm hoping for in the near future. It could also be used for a nightmare totalitarian state, cue North Korea. Les says, I'm pretentious, Parks, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Lessig says, China. Yeah, I think China sucks, but North Korea is worse. And there's an email I want to share with you guys, and it's on this very topic of masks, faces, being able to see faces and whatnot, but I got to go blow my nose and get some coffee first. Be right back. BRB, as the kids say. Oh, coffee. Coffee. So did anybody catch the president's press conference today? I actually liked some of the things he said, but the questions were all submitted in writing in advance, and the White House got to decide, which ones they were going to take. And then, the president also had the ability to formulate his responses beforehand. So, he wasn't really coming up with stuff on the fly. So I'm that all, lessens how impressed I am at what he said. And also, a lot of what he said, he's just not going to act on, It's contrary to his platitudes are contrary to his actual policies. All right. The sounds of motorcycles will be annoying, but I need to open my windows because it's a beautiful day out. Kitty. All right. So it's maybe a little too young for me to brag on it yet, but I have been meditating daily. First thing in the morning, I get up and I go and I do about 15 minutes of meditation. And I did have one large can of something alcoholic last night. But for the most part, I'm not drinking, I'm not smoking weed, I am meditating. Now, I'm not getting much exercise other than walking, which is not great, but all of these things together have me feeling a bit more optimistic, and things are going well with Rose. A few of you in the chat have actually heard Rose's voice, but not recently. Yes, KMO's in a good mood today. I'm explaining, why. Things are like I'm flat broke right now, or I was until a couple days ago. And so broke that I was having to walk down to this Our Place drop-in center because they give out free lunch. So I would pick up some free lunch and bring it back here and watch Rising and eat it. But good stuff has come of that. Like, one, just the walk downtown every day is good. It's good to get out. The weather's nice. A week ago, when it was bitterly cold, I would rather have sat here and not had anything to eat than walk through that, to go get food down there. But it's nice now. And what other good has come of that? Well, I shot a video while I was walking down. And at the very end, I mentioned that, yeah, I'm here to get some food. And more than a couple, like 3 or 4 people sent some donations. And my PayPal balance went from like $11 to over $200 in a short span. Which is good because the free lunch place is not open on the weekends. So I will be going to the store later today to stock up. All right. Michael says, Biden looks like a living corpse. Yes, he does. Although he looks like a living corpse who regularly undergoes expensive Botox treatments. They said Kamala was going to handle South migration problem. Not good news, but very much to be expected to use a police, right? Yeah. Oh, Kamala. So, a reporter asked Joe Biden if he planned to run for re-election in 2024. And he said, that's the expectation. Notice he's not saying that's my intention. That's the expectation. And, the reporter pressed him on it. Well, are you going to run or not? And he's like, come on, man. His standard phrase, come on, man. I can't plan 4 years in advance. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. I don't know what things are going to be like. And I actually respect that answer. Yeah, you don't know what your health will be in 4 years. You don't know what your state of mental acuity will be in 4 years. I mean, I don't know that he knows those things now, but I did respect his answer. I drank a lot of kombucha recently. I don't know what that is. Is that kombucha without the B? Parker says, I am able to find free food. Yep, free food is good. Now, it'll be better when the whole lockdown thing is over and we can actually eat at the drop-in center. You can send me your bank account number if you like. Do I have an email for you, Les? I'm not going to put it in the chat here. All right, I'm just going to read some stuff. Actually, let's close some tabs. All right, close. Who's afraid of Daniel Yergin? So Daniel Yergin is the author of a book that I just listened to, this one. The New Map, Energy, Climate, and the Clash of Nations by Daniel Yergin. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's not a polemic. It's largely a history of the energy extraction technologies and the personalities behind them that led to the shale revolution. And it starts pretty far back. And then he talks about the geopolitical implications of it. So this is interesting. We've got a 2-star disappointed in that skilled insight is missing review, and then a 5-star, oh my God, best thing since sliced bread review. So let's read these two. They're both pretty short. For anyone reasonably interested in world history and international energy, about 80 to 90% of this book will seem to be a long-winded restatement of what has appeared in newspapers over the past 50 or more years. Well, summarizing and synthesizing 50 years worth of newspaper headlines is a task, and it is a service. Nothing new, just a lot of page-filling details. Well, I wasn't turning pages, I was just listening, and that kept me interested. The remaining 10% or so of the book contains conclusions that are totaling, unsurprising, and required skilled insight. Oh, that are totally unsurprising or required skilled insight. Overall, a big disappointment from an author who has almost unlimited access to data, analysis, and industry and global thought leaders. Was that helpful? I'm just going to leave it. 5-star. A timely and comprehensive book for anyone following global politics or energy. What a great book! Daniel Yergin writes an engaging tome about the current state of the energy markets in different geographical regions and the politics of influencing and influenced by the world's decision makers and market movers. With Yergin's typical brilliant analysis and insight, the book addresses all of the key issues of the moment, from the transition to more renewables to geopolitical tensions with Russia and China, and what fracking really means to America. Yergin truly has his finger on the pulse of the world, and has an amazing ability to assess the clashing paths of the world powers. The book doesn't shy away from controversy, and Yergin's capacity to weave in key facts and historical analogies makes the book one of a kind and a must-read. Thoughtful and well-researched, Yergin could probably win, I guess, one another Pulitzer Prize for the new map. Enjoy it. I would say that my personal review, of which I have not written, would be a little less glowing than that, but I did enjoy the book. I did find it useful. Here's somebody who gave it 2 stars and says, the book is an excellent discussion of the trends in the energy sector over the past few decades. However, there is very little information that hasn't been widely reported in general press, and there is very little insight or commentary provided by the author. See, I liked that. I liked that it didn't read like a polemic. It read more like a straight-up history. And again, summarizing newspaper stories from decades on a particular topic is a useful service for a writer to perform. If you need a good book on the evolution of the energy sector since the 1990s, but I guess he means buy this book, but if you're looking for a thoughtful analysis of the issues and policy ideas for change, this book will disappoint you. I was hoping he was going to make a recommendation. Oh well. Anyway, I enjoyed that book. Let's see. Okay, I'm off for tonight, says Les. Cheers, Parks. I was going to ask you to relay back things you have retained from Yergin's book. Okay, well, here are some things that, there's histories of individual personalities. Like the idea for fracturing shale and releasing hydrocarbons within it has been on the minds of drillers for decades. And they got it, they achieved it a while back for natural gas, but then they weren't sure if it would work for oil because oil molecules are larger than gas molecules. And there was one company deciding, whether or not they were going to continue to frack for natural gas or try to frack for oil, something that wasn't being done at the time. And, the question was, well, how big is an oil molecule? And it turns out that nobody had researched that question up to that point. And this is like in the 1990s. They're like, well, we don't know. So that company actually paid to do the research, discovered that oil molecules aren't that big and that you could extract them from fracking. And boom, we were off to the races. Also, this is the point that I brought up on the live stream last night, and Yergin makes it in the book. There's this, piece of conventional wisdom that the U.S. invaded Iraq for the oil. And that, we prop up Saudi Arabia and their despicable, largely despicable theocratic regime for the oil. But the oil from Saudi Arabia and most of the Middle East countries isn't going to the United States. Even before the shale revolution, most of our oil was coming from the Canadian tar sands and from Mexico, and, domestically produced as well. And after so at that time, before the shale revolution, only about 20% of U.S. oil imports were coming from the Middle East. And after the shale revolution, only about 11% were coming from the Middle East. And that was before COVID. But the U.S. has an interest in maintaining control over the oil in the Middle East, even if most of it is going to power China, because if there is a shortage anywhere, that will affect prices everywhere and can cause stability in the U.S., even though the U.S. isn't consuming oil from that part of the world in large quantities. So that was from Jurgen's book. He talks a lot about the future of... I think I'm getting two books mixed up in my head here. I also listened to a book which talked a lot about the electrification. I think this was in Jurgen's book. It talks a lot about the electrification of automobiles and the timelines for that, and it talks about autonomous vehicles. Parker says, I imagine that oil is a number of different sizes as it is different hydrocarbons mixed. Well, oil comes in different grades. It comes in different viscosities. And the viscosity is the nomenclature there is heavy and light. Shale oil is very light. Some forms of conventional oil are heavy. Depending on how much sulfur is in it, it's considered to be sour or sweet. So lots of sulfur is sour, very little is sweet. So this isn't coming from Daniel Jurgen. I think this is probably more Peter Zion, but the U.S. manufacturing oil refining apparatus, which is mostly down around the Gulf Coast, is designed to process heavy sour crude. And what's coming out of the ground here in the U.S. these days from shale is mostly light sweet crude, although it does have other impurities in it. It's not totally sweet, but it doesn't have much sulfur. So the U.S., even though we're exporting light sweet crude from fracking, we're still importing heavy sour crude because that's what our refineries require. What else from the book? He talks a lot about Russia, obviously. I mean, Russia's it's a petrostate, and a lot about the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the dependence of the EU, particularly Germany, on natural gas from Russia. Several U.S. presidents have been very displeased that Germany is making itself dependent on Russian energy, and at the same time continues to rely on the U.S. to provide defense, military defense against Russia. It's like they're playing both sides. What else from the book? What really stuck with me? A lot of it was the timeline. I mean, he's talking about, at first he's talking about the early 20th century and then the post-war era, the formation of Saudi Arabia and the U.S. role in that. But then as he comes closer and closer to the present day, it switches from sounding like history to sounding like commentary on recent news events. And the book comes right up to, the COVID pandemic. So in talking about the whole situation with Russia and Ukraine and, Europe, basically, at the breakup of the Soviet Union, Ukraine was born a nuclear state. I mean, it just came into being as the nation of Ukraine, as not, separate from the Soviet Union. And from day one, it had a huge nuclear arsenal. It would have been like the third or fourth largest nuclear arsenal in the world. I mean, it was. And Russia, the U.S., and Ukraine made a deal saying all of Ukraine's nuclear weapons would be transferred to Russia. And in exchange, Russia, like the Russian pipelines that take Soviet oil, but more importantly, natural gas from where it's produced in the Soviet Union into Europe, that pipeline was laid by the Soviet Union, and it goes through Ukraine. So Ukraine gets a sweetheart deal, or it was getting a sweetheart deal, very attractive pricing from Russia on natural gas, and natural gas was its main source of energy. But it was, even though it had good prices, it wasn't able to pay them, and it was billions of dollars in arrears. But that pipeline has to go through Ukraine to get to Germany and other countries in Europe. So the Ukrainians were just siphoning off gas, for their own needs. And the U.S. has been complicit in, fostering these revolutions in former Soviet nations and making them more, overthrowing Russian-friendly regimes in favor of Western-friendly regimes. And of course, Russia doesn't like it. And so he comments on the whole situation of Hunter Biden or sitting on the board. He wasn't working for Gazprom, but he was on the board and getting paid a lot of money because his last name was Biden, and that gained access, to the Obama administration and now, the Biden administration. But Gazprom, it turns out, is a very, very tiny player in Ukrainian gas, and Ukraine in general. Their whole gas extraction operation is minuscule compared to Russia. And he talks about the history of the Russian people. They were a Slavic people, but then they got conquered by the Mongols, and then the Mongol Empire kind of broke up, and the Golden Horde, which was the portion that had invaded Russia and the Caucasus, they basically just melted into the local population. And but before the Mongols came in, there was a group of Vikings who had come in, and they were the Rus. The Rus had mixed with the Slavs and produced, the ruling class, which was sort of an ethnic, it was an ethnicity unto itself. They were the rulers. And so Russia and Ukraine were both under the Rus. And, obviously Rus and Russia are etymologically related. And Ukraine, the name Ukraine just comes from one Russian map maker who had labeled that part of the map as empty borderlands or something like that. And there's a historical disagreement about whether Ukraine was ever meant to be a separate nation at all. This is all stuff that I'm remembering from Jürgen's book. Anyway, this is all just sort of disconnected random association, so I'll stop that. I'll read the chat, and then I really do need to draw something. Let's see. Mexican government announced last week, says Mushroom Mike, a huge reservoir just discovered a lot of oil. They talk about nationalization of lithium mines in the north border with the U.S. Now, does anybody watch Caspian Report here on YouTube? It's a cool channel. And I watched a report on Mexico, and there's long-standing anxiety in Mexico City that the northern regions of Mexico, they're far removed from Mexico City, and there's mountains that separate the Mexico City region from the northern regions. That there's long-standing concern that the northern regions of Mexico might one day just throw in their lot with the U.S. and join the United States. I don't know that the United States would welcome that right now, but it is a source of lasting anxiety in Mexico City. Daniel says, I worked on some automated equipment for an oil company one time to desulfurize oil. I probably have cancer now. Smiley emoticon. I hope not. Laughing emoticon from Mike. Mike says, I want someone to ask Mexican president what is his position on creating a new nuclear plant for Mexico. We only have one. Parker says, I did not realize there were lithium mines in North Mexico. Well, Elon Musk plans to mine enough lithium in New Mexico, I think, or is it Arizona? Anywhere, somewhere in the American. Oh, it's Arizona, isn't it? That's where the plant is. Anyway, someplace in the American Southwest, there's enough lithium in the ground to just make all their batteries from locally sourced, for that plant anyway, from locally sourced lithium. But lithium mining to date has been a very destructive process to the landscape. So Tesla claims to have pioneered a much less destructive way of getting the lithium out of the ground. Nevada, says Daniel Poole. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. So, and I don't know the exact scheme that they've come up with, where the Gigafactory is, I believe. But it involves basically, lithium is scattered. It is loosely or widely distributed amongst other rock strata. So you have to process a lot of rock to get a little bit of lithium. And usually this involves like brine pools. Like there's lithium in seawater. So you can take brine and you can just let it evaporate in the sun, and then the mud that's left over afterward is got higher concentrations of lithium in it than you'd find in most other places, but you still have to process it a lot. And the Tesla methodology is going to be to do all that processing and then take all the excess material, what in other industries is called tailings, and put it back down in the ground where they got it, rather than just scattering it on the surface. Parker says, check out that Bloomberg Russian oil piece I mentioned above. I think you missed it. Okay, let's see. Looking for a link. Parker, would you post the link again? I'm not seeing it. All right. I'm moving this over to the other screen. Let's just mess around in Fresco for a bit. This is a fun technique I've come up with recently. I make these big solid shapes and then I just carve out stuff with the eraser. So let's make a new one. Oh, not a link. I'm not a mod. Can't post links. All right. If you send me the link via email, I'll check it out. And I'll do it here on the stream. Just the name of it. Well, if you would, post the name of it again. Oh, I thought I selected a different color. There we go. Weird. Okay, let's go. Oh, I think I'm getting this mixed up with Procreate. All right, let's go with Cezanne brush. Yeah, something like that. That's what I'm looking for. Mike says, well, there is battery, but does not in the end still move by petroleum-powered grid. We're going to need to switch to more types of nuclear. Sun and wind don't seem to cut it. It depends on the place. Nuclear is a flashpoint for angry response and indignant response. I personally am not all that opposed to nuclear. I can go further. I can say I'm in favor of nuclear. Although I'm also very much in favor of pushing hard and spending the money necessary to get commercially viable nuclear fusion power. Okay, go ahead and somebody make the joke about it having always been the power source of the future and always will be. All right. So I'm guessing most of you don't look at my my Instagram account, but once I make these sorts of abstract patterns here in Fresco, I take them into Motion Leap and animate them. And let me show you an example of what that looks like. Looks a lot like Star Wars: The Clone Wars. No. Here we go. So here is Here's one. Here's another. So I'd like to turn these into NFTs. Sent via email. Okay. Parker says, let's see. Okay, so yeah. Sun and wind can cut it, I believe. Storage with battery, hydrogen, hydro, and others. Yeah, we're going to need a wide mix of technologies, but yeah, off-grid battery storage is getting better. And, you know, the problem with wind and solar is that peak demand is at night, but peak supply is in the day, at least particularly with solar. But what you can do is pump water uphill during the day using solar power, and then at night you let it run downhill to turn a turbine to generate electricity, to supply electricity at night. You know, it's not workable in every environment, but it's workable in some places. It's worth pursuing. All right, so going to the email. Looking for something from Parker. There it is. Oil news piece link. All right. Oh, subscribe for unlimited access to Bloomberg.com. Already a member? Sign in. So, no, sorry. Sorry, Parker. Can't read this. Do you subscribe to Bloomberg? How is it that you could read it? Mike says, Mexico government announced last week a huge reservoir. Oh, no. Let's see. That was old. Parker says, I would for nuclear if I don't have to pay more for power because of it. Right now, it's way more expensive than other energy sources. I read that hydrogen could use the same infrastructure as natural gas. I'm skeptical, but it is a gas. You know, hydrogen doesn't really occur in nature. I mean, it's always bound to something else. So to get usable hydrogen, you have to break up water or something else. Whereas natural gas, I mean, it's called natural gas because it doesn't require much processing. You take it out of the ground in a form that's almost, you know, usable, just unprocessed. Parker says, I had free articles left, I guess. Yeah. Oh, layer is empty. There we go. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know what's going to work out. My guess is a mixture of things. Mm-hmm. You know, there's smaller reactors than the huge ones. You know, there's the molten salt reactors. You can have small thorium reactors, these little modular things, neighborhood power plants basically, or a power plant that just runs a single building. Something that I would hear a lot from doomers about nuclear energy is you're harnessing the power of radioactivity to boil water. How dumb is that? It's like, no, you're not doing. Boiling water is not the end. It's not the aim and it's not the end result. That's one step along the way to generating electricity. Just ridiculing the idea of doing something that requires a lot of care because you're dealing with radioactivity and toxicity and requires a lot of money and a lot of safety precautions just to boil water. Well, no, it's not just to boil water. It's to generate electricity. Yeah, if you just want to boil water, there are safer, cheaper, easier ways to do it. Let's see. What's happening? This thing is behaving strangely. Wow, it's way off. Here, let's go back. Start up again. There we go. Let's see. Parker says you can read articles with a soft pay way with archive.is. Michael says it seems like all this industries fight against each other. That is why people pick teams. But my understanding, the most energy from less effort is nuclear better. It's cleaner beside accident arguments. If you're looking for affordable and clean, it's kind of hard to beat natural gas. And we have a lot of it right now. Didn't mean to, but it looks like I've kind of drawn the Scarlet Witch here. Anybody watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier? I saw the first episode. I liked it, but not enough to pay for Disney Plus, so I won't be able to watch the whole series. Resend you the link with an archive link. Okay. Going back to my email. Z Library. Oh, wait, here we are. Different link. Archive.is. U.S. thirst for Russian oil hits record high despite tough talk. This is interesting. March 24th, 2021. So I don't know this site, archive.is. So IS what? Israel? What is that abbreviation? weapons. All right. Mike says, it seemed like all, let's see, I wonder if the U.S. and Europe reaction to Mexico if goes nuclear route. Will they attack them like Iran? Well, I don't think Mexico has any ambitions to become a nuclear-armed military power. I mean, yeah, the U.S. would not let it happen, but I think that everybody in Mexico City knows that, and they're not going to try to arm themselves with nuclear weapons. Let's see. All right. Even as Washington champions energy independence and warns European allies against becoming too dependent on Moscow, American refineries are buying more of the country's oil than ever before. The oil tankers docking at the refinery in Bayton, Texas, look exactly like many others plying the waters of the Houston ship channel. But stashed inside their capacious holds is an unusual cargo, Russian petroleum. The sprawling complex, which belongs to ExxonMobil Corporation, isn't the only U.S. refinery that's been receiving shipments of Russian oil. Chevron Corporation's plant in Mobile, Alabama, and Valero Energy Corporation's facility in St. Charles, Louisiana, are also customers. Deprived of access to Venezuelan crude by U.S. sanctions on the regime of Nicolas Maduro, and facing reduced shipments from OPEC nations since the cartel cut output, U.S. refiners turned to Russian oil in 2020 to fill the gap. The buying spree, combined with sharply lower Saudi shipments, catapulted Russia into the position of third largest oil supplier to the U.S. last year. The feat for the Kremlin has been the talk of the oil market, but surprisingly, it hasn't been discussed much in diplomatic circles. Quote, Russia's move into third place has not attracted any attention in Washington, says Bob McNally, a former senior White House policy advisor who now runs Rapidian Energy Group, a consulting firm in Washington. So I should have put in a close quote right there. U.S. imports of crude oil and petroleum. So Russia, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Kuwait. This is not formatted well. The years are cut off. But I guess that's 2000, 2005, 2010, 2015, 2020. So Kuwait was never much of a big player to start with, and they're tapering off. Saudi Arabia has gone way down. But even still, I mean, it's gone down from what, like 14% down to 5%, 6%. It wasn't much to start with. And Russian oil has catapulted from next to nothing to what, like about 6%. Still, compared to Canada and Mexico, everybody else is a distant third or worse. America's increasing reliance on Russian oil is at odds with U.S. energy diplomacy. For the last 2 years, lawmakers in Washington have been lobbying European countries to abandon Nord Stream 2, a multi-billion-dollar pipeline to transport Siberian gas to Germany, fearing it will give the Kremlin further leverage over U.S. allies. Russian gas accounted for about 45% of Europe's natural gas imports in 2019. Congress went as far last year as to authorize the use of sanctions against companies involved in the project. The Biden administration hasn't indicated whether it's considering exercising that option. More important, perhaps, the quiet surge in Russian oil imports shows that the mantra of energy independence championed by former U.S. President Trump is hollow, says Mark Finley, a former oil analyst at the CIA who's now a fellow at Rice University's Baker Institute in Houston. Campaigning last year in Texas, Trump boasted that the U.S. was the, quote, #1 energy superpower, close quote, and the country would never again have to depend on hostile foreign powers. So much for energy dominance, Finley says. In February of last year, the Trump administration blacklisted a trading subsidiary of state-run Rosneft, the largest Russian oil company, saying it provided a financial lifeline to Maduro's government. But no other Russian entities were targeted, meaning U.S. companies could carry on buying Russian crude and refined products. The path for Russia to become a key oil supplier to the U.S. See, key? Really? Let's look at that graph again. They've gone from next to nothing to a little over 6%. Does that make them a key supplier? I question that. The path for Russia to become a key oil supplier to the U.S. was paved with market savvy, luck, and the Kremlin's proven ability to turn Washington's policies to its favor. After years of accounting for less than 0.5% of annual U.S. imports of oil and refined products, Russia steadily increased its share over the last decade, reaching an all-time high of 7% last year, according to Bloomberg News calculations. U.S. imports from Russia averaged 538,000 barrels a day in 2020, and more than 522,000 barrels a day average from Saudi Arabia. Oh, more than the average from Saudi Arabia. Yeah, again, most of Saudi Arabia's oil goes to China and Korea and Japan. The country's gains came in large part at the expense of Venezuela. Exxon's refinery in Baytown, is one of several in the U.S. outfitted with special cokers designed to break down dense, sulfurous crude oils like those Venezuela produces. See, again, in terms of raw quantity, the U.S. is independent, but in order to refine it, we need some heavy sour crude, which we used to get from Venezuela, which we're now getting from Russia, but still not that much, 7% of the total imports. When the Trump administration targeted, how do you pronounce that? Petrovas is how I hear it pronounced. Targeted Petrolas de Venezuela S.A. with sanctions in 2019, the refinery's supply chains were disrupted. Quote, U.S. refineries in the Gulf of Mexico are some of the most sophisticated plants in the world, says Adi Imsirvok, a fellow at the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies and former global head of oil trading at Russian giant Gazprom. Having lost Venezuelan crude and facing less and more expensive feedstock from traditional OPEC suppliers, they have become a major customer for Russian fuel oil as a substitute, close quote. What U.S. refiners have been buying from Russia isn't mostly crude, but a semi-refined fuel known as Mazut 100 that has a gooey consistency. A relic of the Soviet system. At home is largely burned to generate heat, but in the U.S., it fed the cokers to produce gasoline. The top U.S. importer of Russian petroleum last year was Valero, with almost 55 million barrels, followed by Exxon, with almost 50 million barrels. The companies together accounted for almost 50% of total U.S. imports of Russian oil, according to customs data. The supply issues caused by the shortage of Venezuelan crude have been compounded by cuts in OPEC output. In particular, Saudi Arabia's decision last year to slash shipments to the U.S. to their lowest levels since 1985 in an effort to reduce the overhang of crude oil that built up during the pandemic. Consultants, analysts, and lobbyists working for the oil refining industry say they haven't detected any concern in Washington about the increase in Russian imports. That may change. In March, President Biden called Russian President Vladimir Putin a killer and warned that he would pay a price for meddling in U.S. elections. He also said that Putin had no soul. McNally says the White House could weigh a ban on Russian oil imports as part of a larger review of Russian sanctions later this summer, though few in the industry see that as a real possibility. If Saudi Arabia increases its production in the next few months, as many expect, its barrels could potentially displace the Russian ones. So could oil from Kuwait and Iraq. Otherwise, American refiners would still need to find some dense crude to feed their cokers. Crude from Canada's oil sands is an option, but U.S. refiners are probably already buying as much as is available. All right. I wonder if Russian oil is heavy. If the refiners are set up for that, it would make sense if it was. Yeah, so I think the article answered that question. It's not even crude. It is a heavy distillate. Right. So Mexico and Canada would be 1 and 2, with Russia being a distant third. Yes. Parker, at present anyways. If any of those suppliers went away, it could mean big price changes. Maybe that is what they meant by key. I agree that it is suspect terminology. Are Canada or Mexico going away? I mean, they are America's, largest trading partners, geographically closest neighbors, and closest allies, in the same league with South Korea and Japan. I don't think that either Canada or Mexico are going away. All right. Let's see. Let's grab Wanda here. Bet y'all want to grab Wanda, huh? Who wouldn't? She's a honey. Can I copy and paste? Wait, here's what I can do. I can duplicate this layer, right? Can't I? Duplicate selection, how about that? There we go, great. Get it! So now, let's go back to this layer. And we'll grab the original and delete it. There we go. Now let's put this away. Oh, nope, I just want to do that. Okay. Now let's put a body on her. So deselect. We'll do that on a different layer. This will be her body layer. So again, we'll just start with it's a very chunky arm and not very attractive, but we will carve away at it. Let's see, can we do shift and add to the selection? Yes, okay. All right, now let's fill it and start carving away at it. Carve, carve, carve. All right. Oh, sorry, I don't have the chat up on screen. I'll get it back here in a second. All right, ran to the bottom. Is peak oil real? I think the meaning of peak oil has changed from peak supply to peak demand, and I don't know if we've hit it. I mean, it's certainly lower now than it was in 2019, but that's because of the pandemic. It might snap back. You know, if there's a strong economic surge, it will come back. She makes some weird gestures with her hands and have her wrists doing weird things. Let's do something like that. meant to do. All right, so now I put the chat back up and I haven't looked at it. So let's look at it. Oh, I did look at it. Yep. Has anybody seen the Snyder Cut? I did. All 4 hours and 2 minutes of it. I liked it. I watched it over 2 nights. I didn't sit there for 4 hours. I'm taking one massive gluttonous helping of Zack Snyder. There's a YouTuber who goes by the name Nerdwriter, and he did a video years ago about Zack Snyder's movies, and he said that Zack Snyder understands moments, cinematic moments, but not whole scenes. And I find that pretty persuasive. And there were a lot of really stunning, arresting images in the Snyder Cut. And I think he's gotten better about scenes. But yeah, that still holds, I think. So if Les were here, he could make comments about her hotness, or lack thereof. Let's see. Zack Snyder, well, he did Dawn of the Dead remake. He did Watchmen, 300. Let's see. Sucker Punch, which is my favorite movie by him. And he did Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and then Justice League. That's all I can think of. I thought his Watchmen was pretty respectable. Now, there was a sequel to 300. He didn't do that. That was somebody else. Let's see. A Guide to the Films of Zack Snyder. So, filmography, director. Oh God, he's doing The Fountainhead. So let's go back a bit. Lizzie Borden, Love is a Crime, Playground, Peter Murphy, Your Circles. Oh, these are like music videos. Okay, so Dawn of the Dead was his first non-music video. Then 300, another music video. Then Watchmen, Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole. Ga'Hoole. Huh, I don't know what that is. Interesting. Looks like a kid's movie. Sucker Punch, my favorite of the bunch. Man of Steel. Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. Oh, what happened? Snow, Steam, Iron, a short film. Justice League. Hanukkah, Oh Hanukkah, a magical time of the year, short video. It's weird that he reverts to these little short video projects. And then he's doing Army of the Dead Lost Vegas TV series. Interesting. Army of the Dead completed, I guess, a movie. Is that like... Oh, look at that. Dave Bautista. Interesting. Army of the Dead, Survivors Take All. Following the zombie outbreak in Las Vegas, a group of mercenaries take the ultimate gamble, venturing into the quarantine zone to pull off the greatest heist ever attempted. Wow. Dare I try the trailer? No, I dare not. Zimmerman's score for Man of Steel. You know, I can't bring the main theme to mind. Whereas I can certainly bring the 1970s, 80s Superman movie theme to mind. Da, 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 da. It's got a very Aaron Copland vibe to it. Da, 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 da. Most superhero movies these days don't grab me. I'll watch them on a long plane ride, but that's about it, says Daniel. Well, I highly recommend The Boys on Amazon Prime Video. It's a series, it's not a movie, but it's it's kind of the anti-superhero series. A lot of people really, really hated Man of Steel, including Marty, my former Z-Realm co-host. Really hated that film. I liked it. Although I recognized that it was overly dark. But man, Justice League, the Snyder Cut, is pretty damn dark. In fact, I think it's rated R. Okay, you got 16 minutes to finish your Insta drawing. All right, I'll get back to it. Let's get some other layers going here. Let's put something down here. Okay, and I got that Superman theme in my head now. How does this work? I'm experimenting. All right, let's go down below it and do something like that. Let's try a brush instead of an eraser. Let's do the rakes. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. All right, let's change the color and the size. And go again. Oh, and I don't have the chat up. Sorry. Boom. I want a new Spawn. That would call me. Yeah. There was a series. Todd McFarlane was going to do a series that Spawn was just sort of like a background character in it. It was going to be about the two detectives that were, minor players in the comic book, and I think in the first film. But the story, the series is going to be about them, and Spawn was just going to be this sort of lurking presence in the background. I don't know whatever became of that. And I hear great things about the Spawn, the animated series that was on HBO in the 90s. I only saw a couple episodes, and they were not the beginning, so I was catching it out of order, because that was back before the internet. And I guess it wasn't before the internet. But still, I didn't have access to HBO programming then. I would so like to see Godzilla vs. Kong in the theater, but I'm afraid I'm going to end up seeing it on HBO Max. I just kick myself that I missed Godzilla King of the Monsters in the theaters. I really enjoy that film. Can we invert a selection? Yeah. Daniel says, The Boys sounds like it could be worth checking out based on the blurb. Oh, it's good. It's definitely good. Particularly if you like Carl Urban, which I do. Let's see. And Mike says, best or one of them comic movie, Sin City. Sin City, that's a Robert Rodriguez film. It was a remarkably faithful adaptation of the source material. And I like Clive Owen. I like Rosario Dawson. They're both in it. Oh, and Mickey Rourke as Harv. Yeah. Yeah, that was good. Too big. Let's make it even later. Oh, didn't work. All right, try again. Too small. All right. Nope. So Mushroom Mike says Kong and Godzilla needs to be in the theaters. It's a size thing. I saw Pacific Rim 2 times on LSD. Films that I saw on LSD that really moved me at the time: Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. Saw that in the theater on acid. The Crow, the original one with Brandon Lee. Saw that in the theater on acid. What else? Oh, I think I saw Heat on acid with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. It's a Michael Mann film. Oh, with Val Kilmer in there as well. All right. I'm going to call that one done. Let's export it just like that. Time lapse. We'll say... Wanda Booty, time lapse. Save. And we'll also just export a flat version. Oops, that's the wrong one. Quick export. It's a JPEG. Wanda Booty. Save. All right. That brings us to 4:59 p.m. So for the folks still on, thank you. I'll do this again tomorrow. Actually, I'll be working on Geb tomorrow. Less reading, less chatting, more drawing. But thanks for joining me today, and I'll talk to you again soon.